I just wanted to post a quick video. I haven't done a podcast in a while, unfortunately. I haven't had the time, but as you guys might know from seeing my tweets, I listen to a lot of podcasts. So I want to give some podcast shout outs and tell you why I think you should listen to each of them. This is in no particular order of podcasts that I enjoy, but I hope after watching this you'll at least give some of these shows a try and say that I sent you. So starting with the one of the ones I follow the most, and that's Rob Has a Podcast. Guy by the name of Rob Cisternino was on Survivor, the Amazon Survivor All Stars. He's been doing this thing. He's been talking about Survivor, Big Brother. He talks about a whole bunch of shows that I will not mention at this time. But right now he's deep into Big Brother 19 with a whole bunch of guests. He has 4 members that are they have a mix of them every show, which is called the LFC. Brent Wagamott, Melissa Denny, Taryn Armstrong, Alex Kidwell, very great people. They also do their own shows on the Rob Has a Podcast network. They have he does Survivor. He's done Survivor podcasts since Survivor Heroes vs. Villains. So if you want to check those out, it is either on iTunes or robhasawebsite.com, or you can download the Rahap app. It's one of my favorite apps. As well as he also has stuff on his network that he doesn't host. Like they talk about the challenge. They talk about the challenge with 2 of my favorite hosts, Brian Cohen, who I have had on my podcast before, and Ali Lasher, who I want on my podcast. Ali, if you watch this, please come on. As well as shows like The Bachelor, Bachelorette, So You Think You Can Dance, Dancing with the Stars. They just introduced that. Taryn Armstrong has his new show out that he just did a debut episode this past week in The Taryn Show. So please go check that out. Another show that I want to talk about, another podcast that I want to talk about is a podcast that I just got into this past season of the challenge. It's called the No Quitters Podcast. Couple guys from New York, from Barstool Sports, Clem, Barstool JJ, and Captain Con. They do weekly recaps of the show. They just did 2 really great interviews with. One show they had Tori from Are You the One, Cara Maria, Camilla, and Corey all in one episode. And then the other episode they had this past week, they had Leroy, Tony, and Bananas all on it. So please go check that out. They are very hilarious. They say what's on their mind. They're uncensored. It is hysterical. Another podcast that I've been into for about 1.5 years now is Wrestling Compadres. I'm a big time wrestling fan. I don't get to watch that much wrestling during the week because other shows conflict with wrestling, and but with these guys, Wrestling Compadres, Johnny LaQuasto, Dale Rutledge, Scott Narver, they cover it all. They cover WWE, they cover TNA, which I think is called Global Force Wrestling now. They cover Ring of Honor, they cover New Japan. If you want to know any type of wrestling show that they'll cover, Wrestling Compadres, they just moved to a new place, the Stream.tv. They were with Fox Sports for about 1 year. It's a great podcast if you're a big time wrestling fan, and even if you don't watch shows like Global Force Wrestling, Impact, Ring of Honor, New Japan, it's very informative. Like once you see guys moving into places like WWE or Impact, you'll remember the guys' names when you hear them. You'll be like, "Oh, I listened to them on the Wrestling Compadres podcast." Couple sports podcasts I want to plug real quick. I am a local guy, as you see the Warriors poster right behind me. Well, not local, but Bay Area guy. Oakland A's, San Francisco Giants, their insiders, Alex Pavlovich and Joe Steelish. They have podcasts that come out every couple weeks, every week or so. Starting with the Giants, Alex Pavlovich has done great interviews with guys like, escaping me right now, but he just did one with, let me pull it up real quick. He just did one with the voice of the San Jose Giants. They talk with guys from like all sorts of walks of life. His last podcast was with Joe Rizzo. He does. He had Cody Ross on a podcast earlier this season. He had Joe Panic on earlier this season, and then moving on from him, Alex Pavlovich and Joe Stiglitz. An episode that I haven't listened to yet that I'm going to. He just talked with Paul Blackburn. He's had people like the A's president Dave Kaval. Sean Manai was just on his podcast about a week or two ago. Chad Pinder, Stephen Vogt, who unfortunately just left the A's. But you guys got to check those two podcasts out if you're a fan of the A's and or the Giants. Lastly, and it's definitely not the least, podcast that I just got into about a couple weeks ago by another survivor. You guys might have heard of him, Russell Hantz. He's done... I've listened to a good handful of his podcasts. I've been trying to catch up. But he brings them out probably couple a week. He just did one with Cody from Stranded with $1 Million, talking about Big Brother. He has had people like Rachel Riley, Kelly Wentworth, who I don't know if I finished that podcast or not. He has had people like Caleb, Beast Mode Cowboy. He's had Megan, who just got the girl who ended up walking out of BB19. All sorts of great guests that he's had. Russell Hantz shows on iTunes, as well as Wrestling Compadres, as well as all the podcasts that I've mentioned. So please, guys, like I said, Rob has a podcast, Reality TV Wrap-Ups, No Quitters Podcast, Wrestling Compadres, Oakland A's Insider, San Francisco Giants Insider Podcast, and Russell Hantz Show. Please take a look at those shows. You will not be disappointed if you're into shows like The Challenge, shows like Survivor, Big Brother, wrestling, all sorts of great stuff. And I definitely want to thank all the podcasts that I mentioned. Without listening to you guys, I mean, I feel like I don't have anything to do outside of what I do for a living. So I appreciate you guys. And please, if you guys haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel, please do. I've done interviews for the past 5 years, from Real World to Challenge, Are You the One? I haven't had anybody from Survivor on yet, but hopefully that'll change. I've had somebody from Big Brother Canada. I do all sorts of shows, so please check that out. Another one is Reality Radio Podcast. I've been on a bunch of their shows. I am on their network, so please check everything out and subscribe. This is Andy Kirk, and you guys can follow me on Twitter at CSUGodAKirk, and I am out. Have a good one, guys. I greatly appreciate you guys watching this.